Welcome, everyone. This event is a first for Craft Alliance and Tiny Sparks Big Flames podcast, a collaborative video production featuring the Alliance's current exhibiting artist, the widely acclaimed Tommy Simpson. Tommy has been in more than 100 exhibitions and is currently in the collections of several major art institutions across the country. His delightful exhibition featured in the Craft Alliance Renwick Gallery is titled Head, Heart, Hand, The Joyful Art of Tommy Simpson. Joining Tommy later in the program is the gifted St. Louis artist Amy Firestone Rosen. Her unique installation featured in the Creative Commons is called Dancing on the Ceiling. I'm Deb Gott, host of the popular Tiny Sparks Big Flames podcast, and I have the honor of serving as your interviewer. Drew Brodsky from Shock City Studios in St. Louis is producing and engineering the production. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Tommy, what we're going to do is we're going to start by going way, way back to when you were a child. And I would love to, little tyke. I would love to know how your life as a child really shaped the artist you are today.
Yeah, being the age I am now and looking back, I never really realized how important that aspect was. And I grew up in a small little town in Dundee, Illinois, and on the Fox River. And the result of that is I was like 12 and 13. We'd take a canoe up the river with my friend John Septon and camp out by ourselves and come back the next day. And I had a lot of experience of that nature being just very young. And some of it was that it was during the war years. And I didn't know my father until I was about 5-6 years old, because he was in the South Pacific. And so it was at that time, in the late 40s and 50s, you could take your bicycle in the morning after breakfast and come back at dinner time. As long as you came back at dinner time, it was fine. And so there was a discovery, an adventure, and hands-on, sort of what we had for the show here. It was like your head came with an idea, then you put your body into it, and then your hands to it, and you lived your life that way, doing all sorts of little activities and fun and games and building things. And sandboxes were prevalent, and everybody built a sandbox, and all through my high school years and before that, I built all kinds of things. This when I was a junior in high school. At 16, you could get your driver's license, so I bought with my dad a 1948 Lincoln convertible and restored it. And it was an outrageous price. It cost $18 to buy the car. And so I restored that and drove that. And so I had many adventures of that nature, of which I did things that, and little things of nature. There was a railroad that went right through the middle of town, and there was a big warehouse which had grain and feed in it. And it had huge doors, and the trucks would come and fill up the thing. And next door to it was a Dairy Queen. And so being like 8 years old, we'd go to the Dairy Queen, my friends, and we'd get ice cream cones, and then we'd go to the warehouse and climb all the grain sacks. So it was like sitting on Mount Everest or something. And years later, when I was in Pennsylvania, I found some grain sacks in a little person's store, which I bought and then made a shirt out of it. So just to remind me of that experience. And a lot of the pieces that I do are not necessarily art or craft. They're trying to relate an experience you had as a kid. Like the rug over there is a creek. You can see the water running and things in it. And being an 8-year-old, you take off your shoes and wade up and down the creek looking for crabs and whatever, minnows. And so the result of many experiences like that was an adventure of discovery. And so, like 20 years later, what you were doing were adventures of discovery. So that I didn't manifest on one particular media. It was like going to dinner. As I always say, if you gave a plate of peas, you'd say, well, where's the rest of the meal? And so I got an MFA in painting, which I got from Cranbrook. But at the time I was there, they had an open wood shop, so I started making furniture for fun. And I've always worked in all different media. And the long discussion is that art in the crafts is a business like all businesses. And you gear things for merchandising. And the other side of it is that you're working within your own being, trying to find out who you are and how what path to find some joy and entertainment and recreate that adventure of running around and with a dog and in the park and fishing and all kinds of that sort of activities. When I was about 5 or 6, I think, I had 2 great aunts because my dad, as I said, was in the service. I didn't know him. And so my grandmother and my 2 great aunts and my mother brought me up at that age. And my great aunt Florence painted, and not for profit. She just had a whole house full of paint, sitting on all the couches and the bed and everything. And she painted wildflowers. And so my other aunt Mary, as a 5-year-old, took me to the woods and we picked wildflowers. And we went back to Aunt Florence's and because the flowers for her to paint. And so they said, okay, go sit over there. And they put a 5x7 canvas in front of me. And they said, you're going to paint the flowers too. And it was hard to say no because my Aunt Florence made wonderful pies. And so if I did it and was a good boy, I get pie and ice cream. So it was like, and you wonder, is that the life's work? Is that if you go do it, you're going to get pie and ice cream? And so there are a lot of things of that nature that I think acted on me unknowingly, kind of thing. I do sort of whimsical things and fun and joy. And I think when I was about 40 years old, that I started hearing that. And so I had to go to the dictionary to look up whimsical because I had no idea what they were talking about. But I always did things that were fun and enjoyable. Other than I've been in many galleries, and then a few in New York for 20 years, the same gallery, which was wonderful. And they, you conform to the sort of what merchandising would work for you. But also I did lots of other things that were fun. It's like I did a toilet seat for one family because they had an antique toilet. And I made a crib for someone, and I did high chairs for others. And I've made garden gates, and I've made a lot of scarecrows. I remember one day I was going to the dump with all kinds of clothes, and I looked at it, I should make a scarecrow. We need one for the garden. So I started making them. I ended up with 8 scarecrows. Just couldn't stop. And so it's like, what am I going to do then? And so the neighbors came over and everybody bought all of them. So I made, a lot more money than I would have sold on a painting. I was like amazed. But I've done a lot of things of that nature that were very enjoyable. And instead of, as a merchandising piece, you got to work with people to what their needs were. It's like there have been a lot of tall cabinets with a lot of little drawers, and sometimes the drawers, each drawer was a different wood instead of normally they would all be the same. And some of them they asked me to put carved in it all the grandchildren's names. So each grandchild had a drawer. So when they came, they had their own drawer to open up and play with, which is utilitarian, but also the fun and enjoyment of sort of relating that way to have, which was a lot more fun. The fun part of it made it $500 cheaper. Because if you were angry with it, you'd want more money, that kind of thing. So,
well, that brings up a question then, because what people may or may not know about you is you've built 2 houses yourself. Talk about the houses and the furniture and all that part of what you did.
yeah, well, it's sort of building a world for yourself. I've gone to maybe 50 famous people's homes that are historic things just to see how they lived. And we all wanted to be in an environment which we could relate to. And being an artist where it's all hand to mouth more than is that if I went to look at a house, it cost $350,000. And then I could design it and build it myself. It would cost me $125,000. So I did that, in which you could have all the things that you needed in it or liked and enjoyed. So it was a world that was much more comfortable and relatable kind of thing. And luckily I had, through the process beforehand, done lots of different things, so I could build windows and doors and put the flooring in and make all the furniture and do all that sort of thing myself, which I was happy to do. But when I look back, I was really lucky that I could, like the frames on the paintings, if you go to a framer, it's going to cost you $150. If I make it myself, it's $25. And little hearts that I make is that I used to make furniture, and you buy the furniture, wood would be $175. And then you'd have scraps. Originally, I would burn them in a wood stove to keep the studio warm. And then I'd make a bunch of hearts, which would take me a day or two. And I had friends that would sell them. And so I would selling the hearts, I'd get all the money back from buying the wood that made the chair. And so I went through a whole variety of things like that seemed to make sense. And so the lucky thing is I've been doing it for 63 years. So instead of focusing on positioning yourself in a marketplace, is to see how your mind thinks and what you feel about it, and do something that makes it fun for yourself and enjoyable and livable, which I've really been lucky. When I was at Cranbrook as a student, they had an open wood shop, which at that time, a lot of the universities, you had to be an industrial arts major to use any tools. But they had an open shop, so I made furniture. And so I made a little table and chairs that for like 2-year-olds kind of size, just for the fun of it. And one of the faculty there bought the chair and table for his 4-year-old daughter. And then I was been in the Kaplan Modern in New York for 20 years. And some woman came in and said that she had a piece of mine and that had some damage, would I repair it? So I said, sure. And so I went down there, and it was that table and chair 45 years later. And she was getting it fixed up to give to her grandchildren. And so how much money could buy something like that? It's like, a real gift.
You have done so many things, and he uses the word fun so much. I don't know if you've noticed, fun is a key to it. If you had to describe yourself as an artist in 3 words, and you could only use 3 words, how would you describe yourself?
I have no idea I think I made things because I enjoyed making things, but things that meant something to me, that would give joy and happiness, and that would try to come to life. I felt that everybody in their psyche and their head have all kinds of ideas that disappear on them or evaporate or ephemeral because they haven't been educated to just write them down or fiddle with them or play with them without the judgment of society saying that, well, it's not good enough, or it's the wrong color, or it's not big enough. And so I've been lucky to have, because in the big world, if it's this big, it's worth that, and if it's 10 times bigger, it's worth 10 times more money. Or if one of them is worth that, if you had 10 of them, it's better money. Those kind of mind styles that all cultures put on you. if you would just give in to them a little bit, and you come closer to finding yourself. Because I know lots of people who make all kinds of things, and they're wonderful exchange and camaraderie and giving of themselves. And I know lots of people that, if I make $50 and you make $25, I'm better than you. Or if my religion's better than yours, then that's sort of that anger that no self-worth produces in yourself. So you get it by taking advantage of the outside world. But a lot of people who make things don't need that because they know they've found a path into their own being.
So you said a word that intrigued me the first time we talked, and that is intriguing. It's called mind styling. Talk about what mind styling is and how it can affect our creativity.
Your mind style is how you should think. And they do it from when you're young. My parents just let me, do whatever, and they helped support me. In some ways, I thought I was like a garden plant, as they would water me and fertilize me and make sure I got enough sun and all kinds of things and so, and if I did something, I don't recall them ever hitting me or saying anything of that nature. But it's like, that wasn't a good idea. Why don't you think about that a little bit? Or, we could have done this instead of that kind of reproach. And so, I don't know if that answers the thing or not, or.
Yeah, it does. I mean, one of the things that you and I talked about is that mind styling comes from our teachers, it comes from our university professors, it comes from gallerists, it comes from people who they themselves get something out of it if you do it their way, which is kind of an interesting concept, right?
Well, it's all controlling, and if you can control 5 people, it's like slavery every culture's had slaves just because it's good business. To get to them without thinking about the person. It's like they get free work, that kind of thing. And the path sort of I tried to go on to eliminate that is I've met and dealt with many wonderful people that were very generous and forthcoming and would talk to you and give you ideas and support you, and which is the other side of the coin kind of thing.
You're an accomplished writer and poet, and a lot of your work does this a beautiful blend of words and images. Talk a little bit about how that works in your head when you're putting a piece together, when you decide words need to be here or words don't need to be here.
I sort of, in a way, no knowledge of that other than the fact that I sort of allow myself to say those things or think them or put them down without feeling guilty or feeling that it's important. It just, if it makes sort of sense, some of the things we all do make sense to us, but to no one else, why are you out in the garden wearing, hip boots or something? It's like, and so it just allow you to express yourself that way. I don't consider it great works or anything of that nature. It's just a fun thing to do that it sort of makes sense and has fun with, and a lot of the things I don't sell. I just give them away. And I did some early books with publishers, and that's the business kind of thing. And they worked out okay. And so I don't know. To me, it's in everyone. If they would just allow themselves to write, crazy limericks or, that kind of thing, or they wake up in the middle of the night and what's that going through my head? And we jot it down. That it's because if you thought of something that is fun and somebody else enjoys, then it's worth the effort.
What I love about you when I hear you talk about that is it's sort of like a philosophy of what rule book It's not, do I break the rule book? Do I follow the rules? It's what rule book, right? It doesn't exist. It's about fun. It's about joy. It's about following your heart and what you want to do. And that really is an interesting question, because the name of this exhibit is Head, Heart, Hand. Talk a little bit about that title. Why that title?
Well, that's sort of the process of creativity. It's just something comes into your head, and then you put your being into it, and then you use your hands to resolve it, either writing or talking or playing the guitar or gardening. And it's in all of us, I think. I mean, I see it as, if you go 10,000 years ago, there are many things been created, and they couldn't read or write, and there was no education. They just thought, oh, that's a good idea. Kind of like there's a Ethiopian goat herder that saw his goats dancing around and figured out that they were eating these beans, and it happened to be coffee beans. So we brewed them up, and that's where we got coffee. It's allowing yourself to exercise your own creativity, because all the friends I've had, everybody's done creative things and enjoyed it. And then and the wonderful thing is then they become that, so they're actually a person and not just an entity that, as a conductor on a train or as a bus driver. They become Bill, who drives buses, which is more, I think, important and the schooling. Schooling now is geared to make you of sort of educational, but to give you an occupation, and not so much just driven to find the path of who you are personally, which will give you an occupation and give you, the joy of really understanding yourself. And sort of, if you understand yourself and then to find somebody who loves you, you realize that they're loving actually you, and not because you're the CEO of some company or you have millions in the bank. It's because they understand who you are, which seems important.
When you were 17, 18 years old, you told your mom or your parents something that you were going to do, and it had to do with travel. Talk about that for a second, and how that has really affected you as an artist as well.
It says a lot about my parents, but my dad was an ophthalmologist, and when I was graduated from high school that summer, I worked as an orderly in surgery for 3 months. And then I went to the University of Illinois in pre-med. And at the end of the semester, I said, I don't think this is for me. And so I went to the semester, and all my tests, I signed my name and left them blank. So they flunked me out. So I went home to my parents and said, I flunked out of school, which was different because I was 8th in my class in high school on the National Honor Society and all that stuff. And so my mother said, okay. I said, I'm going to go around the world. And I was 18. She said, okay. So she drove me to the bus station in Elgin. I took it to L.A. And then I took the bus to San Francisco and got on a freighter. It ended up in Hawaii and worked construction there and all kinds of things. And then I felt guilty that maybe I should go. So I was headed for New Zealand, but I went back and went to school again. And then I was in business for a semester. And then I went to Northern Illinois University during the day, and at night I went to Elgin Community College. So I was going to 2 schools at a time. And a printmaking teacher that I took a class with for fun convinced me I was an artist and made me see that I was. That was after that. Then I went through art all the time in all my classes. And so after that, and I don't know what he saw in me, or when I did, then he convinced me and it made sense what he said. So, 63 years later, still doing it.
One thing that you have talked about is the idea that it's very easy, partly coming out of mind styling, for artists to, over a long period of time, to become jaded or cynical. How did you navigate that with your experience of 63 years of being an artist?
First of all, I should, what I just said about the University of Illinois, to turn the tables on them, is that 6 years later, they hired me as a faculty member in Chicago at the university. But I divided my time, in a sense, to try to help them, is to have the commercial merchandising gallery that they expect a certain particular thing, one way or another. That was one part of what I did. And the other one, I've worked with lots of different people independently to make things for them. That because around New York area where there's 13 million people, there's a lot of communication. And so I made all kinds of bedrooms for people and like I said, garden gates and made a living, more income that way. And also you can teach. I taught 4 years out of the last 63, but you can do workshops and lectures that'll give you a little bit of money. I've done a lot of lectures you get $50 for, and I did one lecture, I got $2,500. And I made Christmas ornaments for the Mondales when they were vice president. And I did an ad for Playboy magazine called Freak Out with Hash. I made some wooden plates and a candelabra or a vase with flowers in it for the table. And so I've done a whole variety of things like that will pay you. And then you could make stuff for yourself. I made a lot of things in the houses I designed and stuff that instead of spending $30,000, you're spending $5,000 because you're doing it. And you save, you don't need the extra money because you're doing that. And then I've made a lot of toys and fun things to escape from the whole process of all kinds. I did a mouse trap with a heart in it, and it was called Snap or something. Ouch! Because loves this. Oh, it was called Loves the Snap. And I did a lot of hearts and the little flowers and all kinds of little toys, and all sorts that you didn't make a lot of money, but they were easy to do. And so if you put them all together, you can get enough income that you're not going to be rich, which I never particularly wanted to be. I just wanted to be able to keep working. And it allowed me to keep working and all the whole varieties of things to allow yourself to do it. And I did workshops. It's not that I'm more skilled than somebody else. It's just allowed to do it,
My understanding is that you are really interested in people who are creative in more than one part of their life. The doctor who dances, the lawyer who creates baskets. Talk a little bit about your interest in people that do that, two different things in their life, and why that intrigues you.
Well, yeah, it intrigues me because, as you can see, I've done a whole variety of things and survived and had enjoyment. And I'd like other people to have that same thing. And it's I'm not unique in that. There are a lot of people who have done a variety of things, and there are many people who have obligations. They're a pharmacist or a bus driver, but they also tied flies or had a garden that gave them joy. And it seems that should be an essential in people's life, that they have that opportunity to allow them. A lot of times it's almost nowadays allow yourself to do it versus just quitting your job. And I know lots of people I know a lot of people, friends that were teachers who taught, and then they could do their work, instead of Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, they do it Tuesday and Thursday and Saturday, kind of things. And I've had jobs. There was a gallery in New York, Fair Tree Gallery, that I worked at for 3 years, only part-time. And I set up their shows and, did stuff like that. A lot of times I've taught 4 years. I taught at RISD for a year and University of Hartford Art School. But if I moved to that town, I took a teaching job because you get paid right away and get the feeling for what's happening. And as I said, I don't think I'm original or unique in that lots of people have done that, But I just like them allow themselves to do it and congratulate themselves and not punish themselves that, and sort of, because it's, of all the people I've known over the years, you're wonderful, things people can do. Well, it's the whole natures, they just allow themselves to do it.
What I love about you as a person is that not only do you create art, but you've created a life that is filled with joy and fun and innovation and creativity. And so that makes me think of the last question I'd like to ask you. What advice would you offer to someone who would really love to explore their world through creativity, and whether they've been mind-styled, whatever it is, they're a little fearful of jumping in and doing that? What would you advise someone who is in that situation and they just are fearful of jumping in?
I think it's don't start out big. Start out, you want to paint, why don't you just make a little Christmas card? See what that feels like. Or you do, dabber in things, go to a class and make little clay pots instead of making huge big things and trying to make, quote, art pieces just to see how it feels. To allow yourself to do, or write poems or limericks. And just, don't judge it whether it's good or bad, whether it makes sense to you or not, that kind of thing. Or gardening, what plants do you like and put them together. Does this look good? Then you think, I've done that. And you think, I don't really need some more color or something to last longer instead of you need a perennial there instead of it's just a matter of allowing yourself to do it. William Carlos Williams was a pediatrician and wrote poetry. There's Grandma Moses or Mark Hirschfeld. He was a painter, folk painter, but he ran a business making women's slippers for years. And so at the end of his life, he started painting modern, and in New York he has his paintings. I don't think they have any of the slippers in manufacturers. But anyway, so.
Yeah. What do you think about us bringing up Amy Firestone Rosen, who is also in the room? What do you think about us bringing Amy up?
Oh, wonderful.
And asking her to join us for a couple of questions.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, come on up, Amy. Amy is the second artist that's part of this amazing exhibition. Amy, welcome up. We're so happy you're here as well. Got a couple of questions for you. What's interesting about you is you are one of those people that Tommy is really interested in, and that's a person who is creative in more than one part of their lives. So you've been creative as a graphic designer, and you are also creative as an artist. One of the things you said to me that really has stuck with me is that as an artist, you're in the process of creating a vocabulary for your art. What do you mean by that, and how is that reflected in your body of work?
I think because I was a graphic designer for over 20 years, you're really like kind of a translator of someone else's words. And so your job is to make their words shine, and you don't have you're kind of a puppeteer type of a thing. So when I started making art, it was really interesting just to make my own words come out and find my own vocabulary, and it was really empowering to do that.
By the way, Amy has the most beautiful pieces out, and you're calling the exhibit Dancing on the Ceiling, right? So, Jen, I think this might be a great time to bring you up and let the audience ask some questions. Audience, what questions do you have for Tommy and Amy? Because this is a really great chance to get individual feedback from them or responses to your questions.
So this is really a question for either Tommy or Amy, but I'm curious about your paths as artists in your lives. And I'm wondering if either of you confronted a point where you really had a kind of a discontinuity or a real shift in the path of your art, where you really changed things up. And if so, what was behind that transition?
Through the career, I never cared whether I made a lot of money or became well-known or famous or anything like that. I just sort of went where I could enjoy things. And and the shifting of materials sometimes is, if I've had a painting on the wall and people walk by and look at it and keep walking, I've taken the same painting, the same image, and had a rug made of it, and 5 people stop and start talking about it because they haven't been conditioned about art, that you don't know anything about it or something. But rugs are open field, it's like, and so that kind of avenue of manipulating going different ways and stuff is it seemed to work that way. So why fight it? As I said before, that the paintings I do are, nobody paints like I do, which is wonderful. And the worst thing that ever happened is nobody paints like I do, because nobody knows what the hell you're doing, They haven't been educated that way. And so I had no problem moving around, and with imagery and ideas and that sort of thing.
Amy.
I answer. Well, I think I was a graphic designer for a million years, and then we had kids, and then when the kids got older, we moved down the street, and the basement had these ceiling tiles, and I started painting on the ceiling tiles. They weren't asbestos, it's okay. And it was so much fun. And then I sold one, which was crazy, and then I started taking printmaking, and it just kept changing. The thing that was odd for me was when I started taking classes, people would say to me, "Oh, you're not an artist, you're a designer." So, and I really fought the design, and I thought, that's just composition built into my brain. So now I use the design. And those people who used to say, "Oh, you're not an artist, you're a designer," would come to me later on, and so there you go.
Sounds like some mind styling there.
It was a lot of mind styling.
Another question.
When I watch people approach artists in a craft fair, look at a gallery wall, we're often very, very quiet. Like, what's the most favorite reaction you've had from someone viewing your work?
Historically, slightly different. You used to make things, put them in your van and take them to the galleries. Then you'd come home, and that kind of response you never heard or saw, or who bought what, or that kind of thing. And so the only thing, the responses I mentioned before, is that sometimes years later, they've kept a piece for 40 years, that kind of thing. And that's more of a response that I get than immediately finding that from people, and which has been wonderful. But they've kept it for many years. Lots of things, like I made bedrooms and beds and cabinets and stuff, and that they've kept them, which is the same idea. Instead of immediate kind of response, there's have meant something to their family, and so that kind of thing.
What about you, Amy?
I was going to say, I had a show a couple of years ago, and it was like life-size paper doll clothing, and it was crazy. And a woman came up to me, and she said, I was talking and I said, I like breaking rules. And she said, no, you like making your own rules, which I thought was so empowering. I was like, so that was probably.
Beautiful. Another question.
I'm curious about, particularly for Tommy, you have said that you've kind of pursued things serendipitously and found great joy in just expressing yourself that way. But I am curious about the downside of the piece. Have you ever started something, maybe a large project, that you thought this is going to be magnificent? You get halfway through and you kind of say to yourself, what am I doing?
Every project.
What about you, Tommy?
I'm not sure I ran into that problem. Maybe because I'm too gullible to to oneself. You could always let it sit for a while and then do it, or come back and say, well, that was a good start. Why don't I turn it upside down and make something else out of it, kind of. So I never, it's sort of, it didn't work out. It was almost an obligation to your own intelligence or, the marketplace. The market wants this and I made that, which I never really cared about. It was more of just the fun and enjoyment of learning and seeing and doing. And some are more successful than others. 10 years later, you look back at it and say, well, why did I put so-and-so on it, or that kind of thing. But I'm sure that's true with everybody's education and dealings. I could have done it better 10 years later, you'd say, that kind of thing. So it wasn't ever a stumbling block of any kind that way. And sometimes, just the opposite. You make something and you think, well, why didn't I make more of those? That kind of thing. Anyway.
Any other questions?
This is a question for Tommy. I love the rugs that you do. Those seem so different from the typical art pieces that we see, that I've seen in art galleries. I was just wondering, how did you decide to go from a painting to a rug or a carpet? And then I'm curious, you were sharing a little bit earlier about the process, and I was wondering if you could share with us a little bit about the process for actually getting the carpet.
Yeah. Well, I looked at a lot of the paintings, which you only see a few here, but they sort of lend themselves a little bit to like a rug surface. And so it also had different colors. And if you grew up in the 50s, people had Oriental rugs, with a border and sort of a different look. And so I thought it would be fun to do rugs, and some of it was, if I'm my age, I can't make a rug, but I can make a drawing for one, or if I broke my fingers, I couldn't make a rug. So if I could make the drawing for it, so I thought it was one of those things that I could start the process and then have somebody else make it and it'd still look like mine, kind of thing. And that was some of the thinking. And then I have a friend, Bennett Bean, who is a potter. And I was at SOFA show in New York, which was a group show of things. And I ran into him and he said, "What you doing?" And I said, "Well, I researched some rug makers in Kathmandu, Nepal, which is famous for its rug making. And I was going to try to contact him. And he said, "Oh, give the list to me. I want to make rugs. And I'm going over to Hong Kong where my son is, and I can just go over to Kathmandu real easy." So he took all the names and looked up the 4 or 5 of the people's names I had, and we put corner carpets because he painted mandalas. So if there was art questions, he knew what you were talking about. And so we've been dealing with him for 30 years and sending up paintings or designs, and he had a whole business of making the rugs by hand, which were amazing. I went there once, which, if it's a rug is 8 by 10 and you think they're making 100 knots a square inch, it's like, what knots is that, you know? And so, and people responded. It was easier to sell a rug than a painting, because painting has all that mind styling up against you. But rugs, people live with and they understand them, and you know, and they could get a rug that was 3 by 10 feet or 8 feet square, depending on the square they wanted it, and the prices were reasonable. I mean, you could do now. I've got the information, but you can do a square meter, which is for $180, you know, which is really reasonable compared to the work and stuff. And so people would give into their own, you know, aesthetics without being damaged by, you know, you don't know anything about painting, you know, so don't talk to me about it. I'll tell you what it is. And so selling the rugs was a lot easier and cheaper and fun, you know. And I only have 2 left, you know, and I made some for my office and that kind of thing. And so that was one of the reasons for doing it, as well as the rugs were fun, you know, and I didn't have to make them myself. It's like, you know.
Tommy, Amy, thank you so much for sharing your time with us this evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're so welcome. And audience, thank you so much for being here as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And for your wonderful questions. Tommy, how can people get to know your work better or you better?
Well, people did websites. It's Tommy Simpson Art or Tommy Simpson Artist.
Definitely check out his website. Amy, what about you? What's your web address?
I think it's Amy Firestone Rosen Art.
Okay, great. Everybody go to check them out. Check out their websites. Check out Amy's Instagram. These are wonderful, beautiful artists, and we're just so grateful for you to be here this evening.
Oh,
thank you, Tommy. Thank
sure.
you, Amy.
Thanks.
Good night,
Thanks.
Good night, everybody.